We left off last time talking about how instruments have flourished all over the world over the last few thousand years, and we now have millions of instruments. It leaves us with a new problem. How do we organize these instruments? How do we categorize them? How do we think about them? Well, we're going to use a particular method in this class, which is probably the most common, and that's the Hornbostel Sachs system of organology. Organology is the categorization and study of instrument types. In this system, we can ask ourselves one simple question. What is vibrating? Is it the air? Is it a string? Is it a drum head? We'll talk about this today. What we're not going to do is categorize things by how they're played. For example, are they hit? Like percussion means you hit stuff. But that doesn't tell us much about the instrument itself. It tells us about how we play it. And we're not going to categorize instruments by how they look or what they're made out of. And we're not going to categorize them by who plays them. For example, a piano player can port their skills over to playing accordion, and that's a real thing. They will probably have a leg up on playing accordion versus someone who doesn't play piano. However, the instrument accordion and the instrument piano are very different. Let's get into those differences now. The Hornbostel Sachs system was published in 1914, and one of the reasons that many of us love this system is that it allows us to talk about instruments all over the world, throughout history, and even those that don't exist yet. It originally had 4 categories, which we're going to discuss, and then a 5th category for electronic instruments was added by Sachs in 1940. So we have 5 categories. For the purposes of our course, we're just going to think about categorizing things into these 5 main categories. If you're interested in going further into this study of organology, Hornbostel Sachs then breaks down those 5 categories into lots of subcategories. Super interesting, but beyond the scope of what we're going to be doing here. So let's just focus on these 5 categories. Here they are. So what is vibrating? Okay, that's our question that we're going to keep asking ourselves to get these categories. Now, we might not always know what's vibrating right away, and that's okay. We can do some research or look inside the instrument and figure it out. But let's start with these 5 categories. And for our purposes in this course, it doesn't matter which one is number 1 and which one is number 5. It just matters the categories themselves. So, chordophones. Each of these, by the way, is a prefix meaning the thing that's vibrating, and phone, which means sound. So chordophone means string sound. Chordophones are vibrating strings. Then we have aerophones. Aero means air. So in aerophones, it's actually the air that's vibrating. The air that starts the vibration, the air that is creating the sound. Now, other instruments will vibrate the air, but they are not the source of the sound. The air is not the source of the sound. For example, a guitar is a chordophone. Once you strum the guitar, air will move, but air didn't start the sound. It wasn't the origin of what's vibrating. Okay, so aerophones, and we're going to get into all these in detail in a minute here. So aerophones, that's everything from voice to pipe organ to trumpet. Okay, and then we have membranophones. Membrane, like a stretched membrane. You can think of a stretched skin across a drum head. It's anything with a vibrating membrane. Okay, idiophones are, idio means same, so, or the thing itself. So an idiophone is where the thing itself is vibrating. Now this one can be tricky at first. Let's take this water bottle. Modern metal water bottles have great sounds, don't they? Okay, so this is an idiophone. What's vibrating here? The water bottle itself. Okay, again, if you take a guitar and you strum the strings, then the body of the guitar, in other words, the thing itself, will vibrate, but it didn't start the vibration. It didn't start the sound. The strings did. So in the case of an idiophone, it's just an object, and that thing itself is vibrating, and that's the source. So that would be like cymbals, thumb pianos, xylophone, vibraphone, etc. Okay, and then finally, electrophones. This would be where the sound itself is generated or the vibration comes from an electronic source. So the simplest version of that would be a synthesizer, where you're just telling a machine or a computer to make a sound and then playing it back. Okay, so in the case of chordophones, we have vibrating strings. Now the strings can be made out of anything. They could be made out of silk or gut or metal. So guitar is played with two hands like this. We know how our guitar is played. A harp is played upright, and you just pluck the strings. You don't stop them. But they're both chordophones. It's the string that's vibrating. Obviously, all of the orchestral strings and any other bowed or plucked string instruments, banjo, mandolin. And there's one in particular here I want to talk about, and that's piano. And I think this is a great example of how we need to just ask ourselves that question, what's vibrating? So in a piano, it is a chordophone. It's a string. There are strings vibrating in the piano. Now we're talking about a real piano here, a real life old school piano, not a digital instrument, but a real piano, upright or grand piano, has strings in it. And those strings are what's vibrating, so it's a chordophone. And again, it does matter that, if you're a piano player, that's very different than being a violin player. And of course, those distinctions matter, but in strict organology, the Hornbostel Sachs system, we see them as related. Next up is aerophones. In aerophones, it's the air itself that's vibrating. So this one is a little bit more tricky because it's hidden. We can't really see the air vibrating usually. And a great starting example for this is the voice. Ah. What my vocal folds are doing is cutting the air stream, and it's the air itself that's vibrating. Another example would be any kind of flute, woodwind instrument, clarinet. This is a recently invented instrument called the glissopipe, which is basically a recorder, but it has this magnetic strip that lets you slide notes. Still, it's an aerophone. Those reeds from high school. Other examples of aerophones that be worth mentioning would be like a pipe organ. A pipe organ is played with manuals, with keyboard. So again, a pianist will be have a leg up on learning organ. But what's happening when you press one of those keys is you're opening up an airstream, and the air is being blown through in organ pipes and cut by the little mouth of the organ pipe. And the organ pipe length lets the air column vibrate, and therefore the sizes of the organ pipes dictate the different pitches. Still, it's an aerophone. Next up, we have membranophones. This is a drum. It's like a doumbek or a darbuka, small handheld drum. And it has a stretched skin over the top, so this is just a plastic membrane. But of course, you could have an animal skin traditionally, or some sort of synthetic drum head. So a lot of membranophones are drums, but some interesting exceptions to that would be the kazoo. Kazoo has a little membrane inside of it, and that's what the buzzy sound we get is. Now, I suppose I'm using my voice, which is an aerophone, to activate the kazoo. So maybe you could say, when you hear me play this, you're hearing the aerophone of my voice and the membrane of the kazoo. But the kazoo itself only has a membrane. It doesn't create notes or change the airstream. If you blow through it, it does nothing. It's what everyone first tries when they see one. But the kazoo is membranophone. And here's another little quirky example. This is called a mamook. This is something I invented, though I'm not the first to do something like this. This operates in a similar way, where inside this PVC pipe there's a little piece of a plastic shopping bag that's a membrane. Well, I didn't practice before this, but... Anyway, you can hear that kind of buzziness. That is the membrane of the mamook in this case. But most of the category of membranophones are drums. That's usually how we use a... Next up is idiophones. So again, idiophones are just the thing itself that's vibrating, like this homemade gong. It's a piece of metal. It vibrates when you hit it. Also, I should mention that you don't have to hit them to activate them. It's the thing that's vibrating. So you could bow this. Another example of an idiophone would be like a thumb piano, also known as an mbira or kalimba. Last example for now for idiophones is this toy piano. Okay, so it's got the piano interface, you might say, for us to play with normal piano keys, but it's not a piano. It's a toy piano, so it's an idiophone. Now, there could be other toy pianos out there made out of different things, or they might have strings, and those would be chordophones. But this one has, if you can see these, little metal tines. So they're actually solid pieces of metal, not stretchy strings that vibrate back and forth, but a solid piece of metal. So these are cut metal tines to different lengths. And it is therefore a idiophone. And last we get to electrophones. So that's anything that creates sound electrically. So that could be an analog or digital synthesizer. Any phone app like this Wilsonic app. That's an electrophone. Anything that has an oscillator or some kind of mechanical one last note is that there are possibly some confusing cases out there where we just can't fit it into one category. And usually, in my opinion, what's going on with that is that it just has multiple elements. And so those multiple elements could be fit in those categories. Like the kazoo that I brought up, where the kazoo itself has a membrane, it's a membranophone, and yet to activate it, I sing into it using an aerophone. Well, even though that's complex, we could just say we have an aerophone and a membranophone. One last little example of my own design. This instrument is called the Empath 2, and it is a 72-string instrument that where the string sound goes out to an amplifier. So that part of it is a chordophone. But the strings themselves are actuated or started by these empath bridge speakers. So there's a tiny speaker that moves the bridge where the strings go over. Well, that part is an electrophone. So even though the Empath 2 instrument is a complex case, at the very least we could see it as a chordophone that's actuated by an electrophone. All right, have fun out there. Next time we're going to be getting into instrumental techniques. So now that we've got all of these instruments in categories, we're going to talk about how we can further affect their timbre by the way we play those instruments. I'll see you there.